FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and today is June 26th, and it's the year 2019. Hey, don't forget, join our Bitcoin contest. Guess the price, what it'll be on midnight, July 20th. Get your entry in by July 14th. Midnight, July 14th, well, the end of July 14th, whatever. 11:59 p.m., July 14th. And if you get closest, you beat me. I'm predicting 66.50. At this point, you don't have to try too hard. But if you're the closest, you will receive 40 pre-1965 quarters, 90% silver. The next 5 runners-up will each get 1 each. And if we get 1,000 entries, I will up it to 100 quarters, and each runner-up will get 10. Email address kl@kerrylutz.com. Well, somebody who isn't taken in by the allure of cryptocurrencies, who's been spot on about the stock market and pretty close on gold prices. I'm talking about none other than our good friend Martin Armstrong, ArmstrongEconomics.com. Martin, it's great to have you back. So what about gold? It looks like gold is coming on stream here, isn't it?
Well, it's gotten through the first level of resistance, which is good. But this is just largely the summer rally just yet. We're in a stage where everything is preparing, but we have the turn in the economic confidence model, which will be the business cycle, really, which comes in January.
Mm-hmm.
That's the next cycle is what we're looking at as far as being the inflationary one. And what is going on at this stage? How do we get to there? The main thing is that you have to lose confidence in government. People, have totally misconstrued everything about inflation. Quantitative easing, it's going to create hyperinflation. That's not, the quantity of money doesn't do it. Back going into 1980, it was the perception that you better spend your money now because whatever you're going to buy it with it will only cost you more tomorrow.
I remember.
That was the OPEC period. I mean, people were hoarding toilet paper.
Yeah, like Venezuela.
It was across the board.
Mm-hmm.
The view was that the oil embargo, and they suddenly realized, oh, gee, everything that's plastic comes from oil. So it just spread through the entire economy. I mean, here we've had more than 10 years of quantitative easing, and all we've gotten is deflation. The difference is that if you don't think that the economy is going to turn, whatever money you get, you're going to save. And that's what's been going on in Europe. They just don't trust the banks. They don't trust the government. They don't believe that why should they go out and borrow money if it might be cheaper tomorrow? So this is what the central banks don't get. Now, the problem that we really face, and I'm putting out a book on this because it's such a complicated and very important issue. I've entitled it Manipulating the World Economy. But effectively, the central banks have completely screwed up everything. To stimulate, when the Federal Reserve was first created, it did so by buying corporate paper. Then World War I comes in, and the government says, oh, you can't do that. You got to buy our stuff because we got a war to fund. So once they did that, the politicians never returned anything back to where it was. So since World War I, the Fed, to stimulate, only buys government paper, whereas before it would buy corporate paper, which would be directly stimulating the economy. you're buying paper from a company that it can't borrow because the banks are in trouble. So if now it can't borrow, what would happen is it starts to lay off people. So by the Fed buying the paper directly, that was the stimulation. What we've ended up with is that buying government paper for 10 years, the ECB in Europe owns 40% of the national debts of all countries. It has come out and said, okay, fine, well, gee, we can't be like the Fed and allow it to mature and just gradually, leave our books, because then what would happen is interest rates would go up. So they've had to say, well, okay, the debt we have, we're going to continue to roll it ourselves. Then the economy doesn't improve, so they keep buying more and more debt. And all they've done is kept the government on life support. So we're in this period where the markets are starting to realize the central banks have no control. They've lost absolutely everything. And this is where what I've been saying, for the last several years is that's the key to, you're talking about a collapse in confidence in government. Once the general public understands that, and I'm not talking about the people that just buy metals and stuff, we're talking about the average person on the street. That's who has to change, okay? So once they begin to realize that things are not, the government's really not necessarily in great shape, so then that's when the confidence begins to shift. So that the next business cycle that we see coming, that will be the inflationary one. That will probably peak off at around 2024. So that's when your metals rise. But the other misnomer about this is that people think that, oh, okay, fine, gold will go up and the stock market go down. They both went up this week, because when you have a collapse in confidence in government, some people buy metals, some people buy stocks, some people buy real estate. The hyperinflation in Germany, it was anything tangible against government. So paintings, art, antiquities, whatever. You got rid of the paper, you bought whatever you could, and that was it. That was much better hedge than holding paper money.
Right.
So that's what we're headed into. So this rally right now, I mean, if gold closes June back below effectively 417, it's just warning you that, okay, fine, this is the first blip. But then you're going to go back down again, scare everybody, and then they'll say, see, that's all over. It was a fake rally, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But to go this far is showing what I've been saying all along, is that we're beginning to change the confidence level in government. And that's what is so necessary. Draghi came out and said, oh, well, we've discussed this. We're going to, we're lower interest rates. And some of the other members came out and said, hey, we never discussed it at all. He was just trying to bully them into continuing his policy, which has failed. So we're beginning to see the other central banks in Europe not agree with Draghi. I meet a number of central banks around the world, and even China has come out and said they're not going to do quantitative easing because it's a disaster. So the Fed is not really looking at quantitative easing. They're looking at what they used to do before during World War II, and that is pegging the interest rates. So that's a little bit different system. So they would say, okay, fine, we're going to put a peg at, say, 2%. And if it tries to go above 2%, then we're a buyer. But as long as it stays there, you can buy all you want. That's different than quantitative easing. So it's be more of like the Swiss currency peg or something. That won't work either. But what we're really looking at here is a bifurcation in the interest rates, which is going to become really quite dramatic. So you're going to have the fake interest rates for government paper, and the only people that are going to buy it are central banks. That's it. And then you're going to have the private sector. I mean, look, interest rates went negative. Can you go buy a car with negative interest rates? Of course not.
I haven't seen them advertising negative interest rates. We'll pay you to take the car, but you could see it getting to that point, right?
I mean, I have friends that got credit cards. They said their credit card rates have just gone up. You know, some of them they wanted like 15, now they're 17%. Why are they going up and the regular interest rates, official interest rates, the government go down? Mm-hmm. That's what I'm talking about. It's a bifurcation that's happening. Yeah. So private interest rates are going higher. Mm-hmm. They will perceive greater risk and inflation coming, so you have to pay basically for the depreciation in the currency. The official interest rates, hey, look, they may go down, whatever. That's just fake, and nobody's going to be buying them. Mm-hmm. I mean, there have been German auctions, and no bid. So, I mean, institutions can't buy this stuff at these low levels. Pension funds that need 8% to break even. This is a complete collapse in the way government has attempted to manage things. And Draghi has really has probably been single-handedly been the primary source of destroying the world economy.
Yeah, so what's going to happen in Europe? They've got the Islamic invasion taking place. There's just a lot of negative trends there, and it seems to be driving money into the United States. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is why, the stock market goes up, and you get these people here keep saying, oh, it's going to crash. It's got to, they are oblivious to the world economy, completely oblivious. They look at everything domestically, and that's it. And, I mean, look, they've been calling for the stock market to crash since 2009.
10 years.
And, I mean, every new high is, sell it, this is it. And I'm sorry, we've been knocking on heaven's door here, and the Dow's going to eventually take off, and we're going to be looking at this thing in the, at least in the 35,000 zone. But again, it's the same requirement that you have for gold. Mm-hmm. When people realize that government is the problem, and I published the Gallup polls to show that already 35% of the American people believe that government is the problem.
How come it's so few? Why is it so low, though? You and I have known this for decades already, and yet the rest of the world is just figuring this stuff out, Martin?
It takes the general public a lot longer. As long as they get there to sit on their, watch the TV, and that's it. I mean, you ask them who their congressman is, they don't even know. They can name the sports players or whatever, or who married who or whatever, in Hollywood. They couldn't tell you anything about politics.
Yeah,
they just ignore it.
Yeah. Hey, well, they don't understand it, and they don't get how it really affects them. Hey, what's the computer saying for the 2020 election? Trump reelected?
It's showing tight, but it's still showing that Trump would win. Mm-hmm. I hope so, because honestly, what the alternative is at this stage in the game is far worse. A career politician on any side.
What about Master Beto?
Would just simply, be very, very draconian.
Yeah, but Master Beto,
whatever the government needs, they'll pass.
He'll come in on a skateboard, Master Beto. He'll just skateboard right into the White House, right? Look,
it's just, I mean, you take Joe Biden, all right? I have friends in Ukraine.
You take him, please. I don't want him.
He's got so many, corrupt things in Ukraine. His son basically stuck in over there. Had no experience on any energy thing. Blackmailed the prime minister. It's just, this is typical career politicians, and this is what I mean. Why they don't like Trump is that, look, he's got a lot of money and he can't be bought.
Yeah,
So
and he's outside. He's not an insider.
That's the problem. Yeah, he says some crazy things and whatever. I mean, but do we really want a career politician again? I mean, who's the alternative here? I mean, it's we got crazy people like AOC were wanting to end airlines and stuff. I mean, in Europe, they're actually have gone that far. They're trying to ban short-term airfare. So unless it's going to be more than like a couple hours or whatever, you got to take a train.
Yeah, that makes total sense because our trains here in the United States are so good. It would really work here well as well, right? Oh, God.
Look, I've taken trains from Frankfurt down to Stuttgart, and they're terrible. I mean, the German trains are supposed to be efficient, etc. Efficient to the point that they just kept selling tickets, but more tickets than there were seats.
Yeah,
we were standing in the aisles from Frankfurt to Stuttgart.
That's crazy.
And we were looking at each other. How can they sell seats? And I bought a business class ticket, no less. And we're standing because no, they just keep selling tickets. Oh, that's very efficient.
Hey, one thing you look at a lot is the war cycle. Trump has become like the anti-war president, hasn't he?
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Trilogy Metals is a world-class developer in Alaska's Ambler mining district. The company already possesses 8 billion pounds of copper, 3 billion pounds of zinc, over 1 million gold equivalent ounces, and now over 77 million pounds of cobalt. Trilogy's Arctic project boasts an after-tax net present value of $1.4 billion with a 33% IRR. Trilogy is led by an experienced management team with proven success in discovering and developing projects in Alaska. The company is well capitalized, has no debt, and possesses strong institutional support. Trilogy trades on the New York and Toronto exchanges under the ticker symbol TMQ. To learn more, go to trilogymetals.com. That's trilogymetals.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Yes, that is one of the his saving graces. It's what's going on in the Middle East is almost a coin toss. I mean, I know you get the conspiracy theorists saying, the deep state is trying, they've sucked the tankers, etc. I mean, that's kind of really BS. I mean, there's so many people there that would like to do it. I mean, Saudi Arabia would do it, blame it on Iran. I mean, you got so many different players there. Who the heck knows who did what?
Yeah, the Palestinians, they just want the place to blow up. The Iranians. Yeah, so take your pick.
They all have an incentive in this. Did Trump order something? Absolutely no way. Trump backed down and said, look, I'm not going to, start killing hundreds and thousands of people for taking down an unarmed drone. I mean, this is ridiculous. But yes, you have people in the deep state in the U.S. that just want a war. Yeah, neocons they flip from the Republicans to the Democrats. They all they want to do is create a war in the Middle East. I know some of them personally, and it's just I totally disagree with them. But I mean, they were the ones that were behind Iraq to take out Iraq. I mean, same thing, with Afghanistan, and they want to take out Saudi Arabia. I mean, they want to take out Iran. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I mean, my view is you want to do that, or you be the one wearing the red cape like Julius Caesar did, and in the front of the line, please.
Yeah.
Stop sending everybody else into war for what? For your little chessboard game? I mean, we got nothing to gain from this. We got trillions of national debts and Cheney's, buddies all made a fortune, but what did we get out of it? Nothing. And if you do any research on the war cycle, I mean, they lie about absolutely everything. It's not just the weapons of mass destruction that never existed. I mean, the Germans took out an ad in the New York Times and said, do not sail in the Lusitania because they're using it to put arms over here, and they were using the passengers as a cover. and we're going to sink it. It was an ad right in the paper. I mean,
Yeah.
LBJ with Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that, you can find that quote on Google and everywhere else. I mean, he even came out and he says the Vietnamese never attacked us. He says, for all I know, they were shooting at whales that night. And, 50,000 people died. Most of my school friends died.
Yeah.
For what?
For nothing.
For pole dancing and lap dancing that goes on in Vietnam now.
I hear it's a great place. My friend invited me there. He said I'll be able to find hopefully my last wife there, and that I should come over. But I've been holding back.
Look, I mean, go to Thailand. That's much better culture.
Yeah, I would say.
I just disagree with these people. I mean, I'm probably more really conservative. My view is that you leave me alone, I leave you alone.
Yeah, that's libertarian. It's as libertarian as it gets. Hey, so oil prices.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I don't want to go tell people what to do, and you don't tell me what to do, and we're all happy. Okay?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the way it should be. The first rule should be just mind your own business and do no harm. But
right.
They just can't. They can't allow that. So, hey, looking around the board at other markets, oil prices, we're heading up a little bit because of Middle Eastern instability. Where do you think it's going to settle out at?
Yeah, I mean, look, all of this is preparing for an inflationary cycle. The thing that worries me more is largely all the propaganda they've used on global warming, because we're really into a extremely cold cycle. And if we get another bitterly cold area like this, I mean, it's 70 below zero in Chicago.
Yeah.
If we get again like this, you're looking at the crop season has been, a lot of places just couldn't plant because it still was snowing.
Mm-hmm.
And our computer's showing that grain prices, things of this nature, are going up dramatically. You have a major drought in Australia, and we're looking at shortages in food, not global warming, but global cooling. And if you do your research, I mean, it's the cooling which is worse, because what happens, people also get malnutrition, et cetera, and things like the Black Plague or whatever always came when the temperature declines and not when it goes up.
Mm-hmm.
When the temperature goes up, then you had the medieval warming period, Roman Empire, but as soon as it turns down, then that's it. Civilization, contracts.
A lot more potholes that have to be filled in the nation's highways that they can't keep up with anyway. So if it falls a few degrees in New York State and Illinois, those highways will just totally disintegrate.
Yeah, I mean, it's just dramatically colder, and we have to be careful about this, because instead of preaching global warming so they can raise taxes, we should be preparing and stockpiling food supplies, because if we go into a severe declining temperature, as it appears to be going on, that's when you get food shortages.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just go back and read, Jefferson and Adams. I mean, at the beginning back then, and it's about a 300-year cycle, we were coming out of the Little Ice Age back then, and they were worried. They said, look, can't grow anything because the ground is frozen up to 2 feet deep. That's you wipe it out.
Hey, they just had a snowstorm. I think it was in Colorado on the summer solstice. This is unheard of. Or a major snowstorm, and their snowpack in Colorado, the snowpack is 40 times normal for this time of year, and we're worried about global warming and California having a drought. Look how much rain California got this year. I'd say that they're like busy fighting the last battle, and it's just mass insanity here.
Well, there have also been studies on major earthquakes that what happens also when the solar activity of the sun turns down, as it's been doing, for some reason, that's when volcanoes and earthquakes actually increase. There are a lot of different theories on this, but even on like major earthquakes in California, they seem to be preceded by extreme drought, then extreme rain. And the theory is that helps to, really distort everything. And then if it coincides with a decline in the solar output, that's when the big earthquakes come, apparently.
Yeah.
It's interesting studies, at least correlate this stuff. But Europe is really shooting itself in the foot over all of this stuff. I talked to a couple car manufacturers, and it's just changing everything. They can't produce the small cars, like the little smart cars and stuff like that, because of all the pollution things that they need. Those cheap cars, the added material that they need to comply with the new regulations will increase the cars by 20-25%. And so now, to make that affordable, they're looking at moving towards larger cars, so the price doesn't look as dramatically increased. But the streets, you go to Rome or whatever, they use the smart, the little cars. They can park everywhere because there's no parking.
Yeah, exactly. Well, small cars in the United States, potential disaster. I've learned it from accidents I've gotten into myself, head-on collisions. When you're in a car that weighs 2.5 tons, your odds of surviving a head-on collision, even with all the airbags and everything, are dramatically higher than if you're in a small car that weighs 1.5 tons. It's just the physics. It's, you can't fight the physics, but it's good for the environment. And I feel so good driving a hybrid car because I use less gasoline. And aren't I just the best? The whole virtue signaling thing, which is enough to turn your stomach as well. Maybe just the whole climate change argument is one big virtue signal.
Well, they've been caught changing the data so many times. It's just, and the interesting thing is, we do serious research. You do not stop at 1850. Come on. Whatever happened to the ice ages before? Oh, we don't look at that because we don't have the data. That's nonsense. You've got ice core samples that go back thousands of years.
And the tree rings. They can figure all this stuff out.
It's an agenda that goes on, because if it's global cooling, you can't basically increase taxes or fine somebody. If it's global warming, oh, wow, okay.
Yeah. Then we actually might be causing
spill,
it.
They go after the oil companies. When it's a red tide, they want to blame somebody.
Yeah.
I'm in Florida. Oh, it's farmers. I said, where are farmers around here?
Actually, I got to tell you that Palm Beach County, which extends way further than anybody knows, it extends 50, 60 miles from the east coast of Florida, is the United States' largest sugar producer, and all of the pollutants from sugar production, which and I know should never be taking place probably anywhere in the United States because it's not economically viable. It only exists because of farm subsidies. As a result, all of that pollutants goes into Lake Okeechobee, and then it gets discharged into the channel that goes across the state, and then it helps the phosphates and all that help generate the red tide. There actually is a lot of farming, but it's very stealthy. You never see it. But hey, yeah, you can't blame man for global cooling, but you certainly can blame him for global warming. And global cooling's bad for the air conditioning industry, which is Carrier, United Technologies, and all these other big companies, right? So they definitely don't want global cooling.
I do have to commend Tampa Times. Actually, did a piece on the whole red tide, and they actually got satellites showing that most of it's a huge cloud of red dust that comes over, and it follows the same path as the hurricane.
Yeah.
And it's taking it up out of the deserts in North Africa and brings it over here, and then basically he said that's what has traditionally fertilized a lot of the rainforest stuff.
Since we've been alive.
I just Googled on the red tide myself. I said, okay, fine. When's the first one that there was a big fish kill. It goes back to 1640.
Yeah, growing up in New Jersey, every summer or every other summer, there would be a red tide. I think the phosphates could be making it worse, but it's certainly not the cause. Red tide's been with us, forever. So
yeah, it's basically an algae that does grow, and it sucks up all the oxygen, and the fish die.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just kind of the norm, but this year was worse than ever. And it was on both coasts of Florida, the West Coast and the East Coast. And like you say, environmentalists are always looking for somebody to blame for something, even for naturally occurring phenomena. So interest rates, like you said, there's going to be two interest rates, one for what the government pays and one for what you and I pay. But that one that you and I pay actually determines private activity. Is that going to stay low? Maybe not as low as the government one, but low enough because the economic activity is depressed, or is it going to go higher as the inflationary cycle kicks in?
No, interest rates on the private side will continue to rise, probably straight into about 2024 to 2025 area.
Mm-hmm.
Interest rates are a factor of what people, why should I lend you money if inflation is going to be 10%, and I obviously can't lend you money at 5%. I got to need something more than the inflation rate. So if I think the inflation rate is going to be 10, I want 15.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that's basically what an interest rate is. It's the price of what you think the money is going to be in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So it's got that factored in there, inflationary expectations. So like Bernie and I think maybe Pocahontas, Hiawatha, they're both proposing like a 15% cap on consumer interest rates. As a practical matter, what will that do to the availability of consumer credit?
Well, actually, on that score, it's called usury. We always had that. It was Volcker who lifted it because he wanted to raise interest rates to stop inflation. So he lifted it back in 1980 so he could raise the discount rate to 14%, but of course, then they never put it back. So because of that, then you had, interest rates on credit cards going to, over 20%, which is ridiculous. And it should be, the cap should be restored. But, this is what happens. I mean, the problem is that banks will not lend to small business, which creates jobs. 80% of small businesses are declined. Mm-hmm. All right. They would rather lend on a credit card because they're going to get 17 to 20%. They can't get that from a small business. So I do believe that we should restore the usury laws the way they were. And then you would maybe create more of an economic boom because then they would start lending back to small businesses, which create jobs.
Right. Yeah, that is very true. And
I mean, the other thing is student loans. I mean, that's what the Clintons did. I mean, the Clintons, people don't realize, they rescinded, basically, they repealed every law coming out of the Great Depression on banks. Correct. Every they allowed interstate banking. They basically repealed Glass-Steagall. Then what has happened is what I call, they converted the banking industry from relationship banking to transactional.
Correct.
So before, I mean, I have been on boards of banks. I mean, a relationship was, okay, fine. You want to start a business. I'm going to come down, really inspect it, come down, kick the tires, etc. I know you personally. Okay, I'm invested. What are you doing? What's your ideas? The bank would then lend you money, and it's a relationship. All right. What has happened with the Clintons is that what they did was they ended up reversing everything, taking all the restraints off. So then banks, this was the 2007-2009 crisis.
Right.
Rubin sold them the idea, well, gee, we'll make our bank stronger if we just write the loans, we package it, and we sell it to somebody else, then we don't have the bad loans on our books. Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Well, they spread the risk to everybody else.
Right.
Now, what happened was the banks didn't give, really, honestly, they could care less about the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
All they were interested in is, what can I sell? So then they took mortgages and they sold them. Again, that destroyed small businesses.
Very true.
I mean, you can Google it. About 80% of small businesses can't get a loan.
Mm-hmm.
Why should I do that? You know, I can put in mortgages on fake values, and I can sell them to a pension fund, and they'll buy it. They're standing in line to get this stuff. And this is what happened.
That's true.
So then they blew up the entire world.
Yeah, this is true. What you're saying, absolutely.
And they don't go to jail for it.
Yeah. And
it's all legal, and this is what the Democrats did, and that's why Hillary stood up. I mean, you can Google that too. She said, you know, whatever I say publicly, don't worry about it. You know, because, I mean, just follow the money. All the bankers were lending, were donating to Hillary's campaign.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even Goldman Sachs came out and said no partners are allowed to donate any money to a Republican, to Trump.
Yeah, isn't that great? Yeah, unbelievable. And they
Hillary's going to be there for the middle class. I feel your pain and all. Yeah, come on. They're the ones that have really screwed the entire economy with student loans. The bankers said, well, gee, why should we lend money? Eliminate bankruptcy. Oh, okay, fine. We'll do that for you. So they did that too. So now you have all these, the Census Bureau shows that kids are in their 30s still living with their parents. They can't afford to buy a house because they got student loans.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally destroyed the economy.
Yeah.
So real estate isn't going up because you got the next generation can't afford it.
Right. It's very true. What you're saying, absolutely. And then they can't figure out why the economy is so screwed up, right?
Look, I do agree putting back the usury laws, and I basically think that student loans, that's it. These kids are paying for degrees that are worthless. Even Forbes came out and said 65% of kids can't find a job on what they have degrees in. I mean, we have one girl working for us. I mean, she went to college, I don't know, and then grad school and everything else to get a degree in marine biology. Everybody wants to go play with dolphins. She couldn't find a job. She works for us.
Yeah, well, do you have any dolphins by you? There's a lot of dolphins on the west coast.
Well, yeah, they swim up and down all the time.
Yeah,
but I mean, as she said, she spent all this money for these degrees, but then, everybody will go volunteer to play with the dolphins, so why should they hire somebody?
Yeah. Isn't that amazing, right?
But you go to university, no problem, we'll give it to you.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't that great?
There's no ethics in education anymore. The education system is completely bogus. I mean, the way the Romans did it, which are the Swiss still do it today, most kids don't go to college. You do the first, basic school, reading, writing, arithmetic, and then you become an apprentice, and you actually learn from people in the industry. So if you want to be a sculptor, you go to a sculpture shop. You want to be an economist, you would come to one of our places. This is how you actually learn. I mean, the way it is with us, I mean, I don't really want to hire somebody with an economics degree because I got to completely retrain them. And they go, well, the professor said this. I'm sorry, that doesn't work.
Reality.
I'd rather get somebody that's interested in the subject who doesn't have a degree, thank you, and much better.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we know that. We've seen this over and over again. It's just the fraud that takes place and the things that they want you to believe that are just not true, Martin. It really is very, just very disheartening to people who really believe that.
Look, I was asked by 3 of the top 10 universities in the world if I would consider teaching there. I looked at them and I said, excuse me? And one of them, I won't mention name, one of the very top in the world. They actually bought me lunch, etc. And I said, "Why are you asking me to teach?" They said they know what they teach doesn't work.
They figured that out,
and
huh?
I'm like, "You're charging people $50,000 a year for this stuff?" But their problem is there aren't that many of us that have been actually in world finance and hedge fund managers, etc. I mean, you can't get a degree in it. It's something you had to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody wants to go back to teach. So that's the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that really is.
I agree.
The problem,
I mean, I don't want to go. I said, I'll be glad to give guest lectures. Okay. But I don't want to sit there and teach some class of 50 kids. Yeah. I'm not interested. Not my thing. And nobody else that's ever been a hedge fund manager wants to do it either.
Yeah. Every now and then you get a guy who will do it. But yeah, it's unusual to say the least, right?
Yeah, maybe,
you just
when I'm 85 or something, maybe. I don't know, the last year or two. But, I mean, it's just not, who wants to go do all this stuff? I mean, it's guest lectures, no problem. I'll be glad to show up. But, then you're in conflict with the professors who's just reading out of a book. I mean, they don't even teach foreign exchange hedging. Mm-hmm. They still teach all the old theories, pre-1971, Keynes, etc., based on a fixed exchange rate.
Yeah. Yeah,
that wrote back a long time ago. I hate to tell you.
Yeah. God, it's 40 years already, 40 plus years.
Yeah, it's like, and they still don't teach foreign exchange.
Yeah, which is the biggest market in the world. We all know this. Hey, so looking ahead, Dow, you're thinking it's going up to 35,000. And it's just going to keep going up while everybody's saying that the rally's over, we're in a bear market, et cetera, and they might be right.
Yeah, look, you're going to get one more decline into the fall, and that will then everybody say, "See, this is all over," blah blah blah. But you always have to have that first counter move in order to swing it back the opposite way. So we should see. From the summer rally, we should see something down into the fall and most of these things, and then we'll take off in the opposite direction as the business cycle finally turns. And that seems to be coming more in 2020.
And it's going to turn. Turn it will. So China, what is going on with China exactly, Martin? Their economy, they've never had a recession before. They don't exactly know what to do here.
Well, they're trying to avoid all the mistakes of the West. I mean, I will say when I was called in by the Bank of China, and I went over it. I mean, I went there honestly to go see I said, all right, fine. I went to go see the wall.
Yeah.
And Forbidden City. So it's great. That's no problem.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
This was back in '97 when the Asian currency crisis. I thought I would have to listen to a bunch of bureaucrats like I have to do at other, central banks. And it was quite amazing. I mean, everybody there, they had sent people out who worked on dealing desks in New York, London, Tokyo, and then they went back to run the bank. And I sat down with them, and it was like sitting with a bunch of traders. I mean, it's like, wow, okay, this is good. So they actually manage things far better than you see in the West. Yes, they have a recession, mainly because a lot of at the provincial level, a lot of them went out and they borrowed money, but they borrowed money in dollars. So they have foreign exchange risk, and it's like they have no clue what they were doing.
Yeah.
So this is part of the big problem. As the dollar rises, you have third world emerging markets, etc., locked into dollar loans that they bought because they thought they were cheap. And that's very nice. But as the interest rates go up and the currency goes up, they take huge losses.
Correct. Yeah, very true. And we see that it's still going on. So that's led to a tremendous flow of funds back into the U.S., all that dollar-denominated debt. And how, I've heard as much as $1 trillion a year is coming back in that dollar-denominated debt. And that's a trend that really shows like no signs of abating, does it?
Well, there is no alternative right now. I mean, Nigel Farage came and spoke at our Rome conference, and he he stood up and he said, "Hey, listen, of course I'm going to come here." He says, "You guys are the alternative to Davos." But it's just a joke over there. I mean, I've known Nigel personally, so I mean, you know, he's not a paid. Wasn't a paid speaker or something like that. And I really do have to commend him. I mean, he agreed. He wanted to come down for our conference, and then all of a sudden he started a brand new political party about 30 days before, and I'm thinking,
I remember,
he's not going to be able to make it. And he called me. He says, "Marty, I am coming. I can't stay I got to rally the next day." But he flew in, did his bit on the stage, and then flew out in the afternoon.
That's amazing.
And look, it's just simply that Europe is a basket case, an absolute basket case. I mean, you got 80% of the people in France supporting the LFS movement. Mm-hmm. I go to Germany, and you go to southern Germany, you know, down by where the cars are, Stuttgart, etc., and Bavaria. They say they're Bavarian first, German second.
Mm-hmm.
It's Italy. It's the same thing. You know, Spain is left versus the right. I mean, it's the regional differences in the economies are exposing the weaknesses.
Yeah,
and that's what's happening.
Very true.
Italy's looking at creating these what would really be a two-tier monetary system, and it's just it's a joke. I mean, Germany was allowed to exceed the limits. So was France. Italy wants to. Oh no, you can't. Why? Because they were one of the founding members, but they're not as big as Germany and France politically. Yeah. So just too biased.
Yeah. Well, it's always it's not always what you know. It's usually who you know. Hey, one thing I wanted to bring to the attention of you out there that you're probably not aware is that a lot of the people who we hear in the Spygate, Martin, are all people who kind of lined up against you when you were having your issues with them. Guys like Comey and all these other people who are lined up. These people never go away, Martin. They're always around.
Oh, no, they don't. And I know most of them. So
I know.
It's, their view is very simple. Stupidity, is a major criteria to be part of the group.
Yeah.
They accuse me of manipulating the world economy. I'm looking at them like, what? They think I do one of these conferences. Okay, and yes, there's a few $1 trillion in the room, but they think I say this, and everybody in that room stands up like a robot and goes out and does it.
And just follows your
orders. And then I say,
right?
Okay, fine, the stock market's going to go up. He said that back in 2010. Even Barron's wrote an article. Oh, Armstrong says it's going to be new highs. Isn't that a joke?
Remember, yeah.
And when it happens, it's like they don't say, "Oh yeah, he was right." Mm-hmm. But it's like, see, it happened because he's got more minions than everybody else. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And maybe it's going up because of what I'm saying is correct. Okay, rather than a bunch of mindless people to just do whatever I tell them to do. I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah.
But if the way they try to manipulate the world economy is with fake news, then that's what they try to accuse me of.
Mm-hmm. Well, they always project. Right? They're always.
I'm sorry, you can Google what I'm saying, and it's spot on. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Google what you people say. It's all made up.
Yes, very true. It's just amazing to me, you talked about that. These guys, the same guys who set you up, were the same guys who were trying to get rid of Trump. Don't you find that a little ironic, though? and they were using the same type of things, but Trump is Trump. Hey, we're just ordinary people, even if you're better off than most. There's a limit to how much you can fight. And if they sequester all your assets are frozen, and you wind up with a public defender, you're pretty well screwed.
Well, yeah, because look, they own the courts too. And no court, the only court that, I mean, honestly, that when they had to release me is because I got in the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. Once, the Supreme Court ordered the government to respond, then they had to release me. That's the problem in this country, is that the Supreme Court is the only one that's legit.
Somewhat.
All the others are on the take, really, one way or another. Politically, monetarily, I mean, not every judge takes money, but I mean, some of them do. Yeah. And there's no mechanism to even possibly have a judge investigated. Mm-hmm. That's the real problem.
No, it really is not.
The judge totally I had, not. I mean, you can Google him, Richard Owen. He had dementia. I mean, there are times that I would go in there, he forgot who I was.
He sounds well qualified to me, Morton, right?
And
there a little dementia among friends.
Two high-profile cases, mine and Frank Quattrone. Mm-hmm. What did they do? They had to, the first time in history, both of our cases were taken away from that judge because they were afraid, that he would just keep going. Yeah. They would say, yes, okay, fine, he hasn't done anything wrong, but, and then hint, end this. And he would, they said I didn't do anything wrong, and we just keep going. Mm-hmm. Statute for contempt is 18 months. Wow. But unfortunately, it takes you years to get into the Supreme Court. When I finally got there, then they had to release me. That's it. And then they said, oh, well, maybe a pair of fresh eyes will help. Then they give it to another judge, and of course, he releases me.
Yeah. Well, they released you because they had to, obviously. And I've seen this system. I've been involved in it, up until 7 years ago. My whole life, been screwed by it. Cost me millions and millions of dollars. Fortunately, unlike you, it didn't cost me my freedom. So I'm grateful for that. And I'm not embittered because, what good does that do? It doesn't do you any good.
Look, the way it works is you just look at it. They will go after anybody who competes with the big houses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
They will want them in prison, fines, whatever. They destroyed Revco. They destroyed
Anderson.
Drexel Burnham over, 50,000 people lost their jobs on the so-called Michael Milken stuff, and that was nonsense too. And they went after first Boston. They went after Revco, which was Chicago. And then what happens? All the business gravitates to New York. Yeah. And we ended up with what? MF Global, who steals all the people's money trading with it.
All of it.
And then he doesn't go to jail.
Yeah, well, he gets promoted and gets a new government position. That makes total sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then he comes out, I'm going to start another hedge fund. You just lost $1.6, trillion and or $1 billion, and now because you were never charged, okay.
Yeah.
And even now, though, 2007 to 2009.
Yep. Oh, it's mad.
All right, and the government gets so, had so much criticism because they never charged any bankers, so they charged the firms criminally. Of course, nobody went to jail. Yeah. And then the SEC says, we're going to give them an exemption. Mm-hmm. Goldman Sachs was charged criminally with fraud. Right. They should lose their license like everybody else, but they don't.
Yeah, how's that work?
SEC gives them an exemption.
How's that work? How's that work out there? How's that happen? Yeah, we see it over and over.
That's just the way it is. But everybody knows it.
Yeah, you should. If you don't, you should know it. Yeah, that is.
Ironically, when I finally got out, so many people came to our conferences, and I was like, "How come?" And they said, "Now I know I could trust you. You're not one of them."
Yeah, well,
that's a good point.
Yeah, well, it's really disheartening, and when you see good people tripped up in this nonsense, and it hurts the country. These people couldn't care less about you, the country. They couldn't care less about anything. I mean, you know that, right? I mean, they just don't care any bit.
Look, there are stories out. I mean, SEC is now controlled. The two top people in the SEC are ex-Goldman Sachs.
Mm-hmm.
And
says it all, right?
One of them, Alan Cohen, who is the chief compliance officer, all right, was there for the Malaysian crisis, for the Greece crisis, all these countries that they blew up, and he's the number 2 guy at the SEC.
Yeah. Well, he sounds well qualified, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
All right. Well, we got to go. Make sure you check out Martin's site, Armstrong Economics. Sign up for his frequent emails. I get 3 or 4 of them. I don't know when you find time to sleep, Martin, because I usually get them at like 3 or 4 in the morning. And, I'm wondering, hey, is he really up now? Is he really doing this? But
yeah, that's the curse of being a hedge fund manager. You always had to be aware of everything globally, what's going on all the time.
Yeah, very true. Hey, well, anyway, it's always great speaking to you. Check out Martin's site, armstrongeconomics.com. Sign up for his email blast. Really good. Hey, just remember, Bitcoin contest, last entry is 11:59 p.m. on July 14th. Just send us your best guess what Bitcoin's going to be and put Bitcoin in the subject line, and we'll see who wins. Martin, always a pleasure. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Thank you for inviting me. Take care.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.